as well.
I like that.
There were several incidents that happened that people don't remember. I think it was in 1986, the gentleman was blinded. And then in 1993, the aneurysm clip in the female that, she didn't even get scanned because it was ferrous. Well, then in 2001, Michael Colombini, the 6-year-old, passed away due to the missile effect with the O2 tank. So that's when we started paying attention to safety. That's when it happened. And so now in 2002, we get this first ACR guidance document on MR safe practices. Then in 2007, it updated. Then in January of 2013, it updated again. And in 2019, there was a slight addendum. Well, wow, these were just guidelines. So just guidelines that you followed.
Yeah, and they weren't real detailed, right? It was only about 7 or 8 pages.
Right.
And then, it was open for so much interpretation. I'll say that. And then, bam.
Yeah, 2020.
April 2020.
And it was kind of a surprise, when it's like, we heard it's coming, and boom. It's here, right? And so we've got a slide that shows you the cover, so people can see what it looks like. It's freely downloadable for the ACR's website. The easiest way to find it is just Google ACR manual on MR safety, and it'll open right up on their website. And so we encourage everybody to take a look at it. It's now, what would you say, about 50-something pages?
It is 50,
I can
around
look
55.
at it here in a minute. But and the other thing that's nice about it
56. You were really close.
Wow. You should have rounded up.
He was still wrong.
Yeah, I know. I'm a kind of pessimist around now. Anyway, so as you look through the document, what I noticed that's different, maybe it was with the white paper or the previous documents. I don't know. I never noticed it before. But when they make statements, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that's new, particularly, when they make statements, they list a reference. And so it's got like 2 or 3 pages of these references.
Right.
And then so if you see something and you want to know, well, on what do they base it, then you can go look at that reference. And for the people listening that have never done this before, I mean, if you work in a medical center that's got a medical library, then you can go pull the journal. But there's a website called PubMed, one word, PUBMED, med.gov. Now, it used to be .com, but it's .gov. Now it's an NIH organization, and it catalogs all medical literature. Okay, so from all specialties.
And it's very high quality information, in my opinion, historically.
Right. So you can just go in and you can get the title, get the title of the paper. So you open up PubMed, paste that title in, and you'll at least get the abstract of the article.
Nice.
Okay. 99% you get the abstract. Sometimes if it's an editorial, they won't show you anything. It'll just direct you to the journal.
Right.
Well, then if you don't have subscription to the journal, which sometimes you can't see it, but sometimes some of the articles that they give you on the journal are free to download. So there's a lot of stuff out there. But at any rate, they've got the references, and so that's really neat to do, is to go look at the references and see where
they're getting the information from.
Where they got the information from.
Right.
Now, the other thing that is, I think, kind of a top level difference about this paper or this manual. Prior to the manual, the only term they used, or the only thing they addressed in terms of an MR safety organization, was the MR medical director, right? They always referred to the MR medical director. And every time they mentioned a radiologist, every time, if you look back at any of those guidelines, every time they mentioned a radiologist, they used the phrase level 2 personnel MR radiologist, right? They say that every time. But they never really, that's the only positions that they mentioned, right? Now they're using the terms MR, of course, MR medical director, MRMD, but also MR safety officer and MR safety expert.
Nice.
And where they got that from, if you look at their references, is this consensus article that I actually was fortunate enough to participate a little bit in with the SMRT. of ISMRM, SMRT, all these other acronyms of groups in the UK and Australia and New Zealand, all this fun. The paper is something titled Responsibilities of MR Safety Management. And this paper defined the terms MR Medical Director, MR Safety Officer, MR Safety Expert, and gives their job functions, responsibilities. The ACR has basically incorporated that. So now the ACR spells out
the exact responsibilities.
Functions.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and it references that.
And I
paper.
think that's important to have that in there. And you don't have to interpret it as much.
It's more defined.
It's much more defined, and it's pretty much clearly laid out. And I think it's important to recognize these positions because they're absolutely critical at this time with MR safety. And you think about the number of incidents that have actually occurred, and only a small percentage are actually reported to that FDA MAUD database.
Exactly.
And
Right.
I know that everyone that's going to listen to this is going to be like, oh, I know at my site we've had an incident and it was not reported. We've had this happen. So very, very small percentage, but if you look, there's a spike coming on as far as MR safety incidents. So,
Well, I got a question. Well, with the is this more considered guideline still, or is this like a recommendation?
Well, okay. That's a good question. Let me.
Am I jumping ahead? I'm jumping ahead on you.
No. let me read you what it says about it. Okay?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Now, this is in the preface of the manual, okay? And in the preface of the manual, it says, initially published in 2002, the ACR MR Safe Practice Guidelines established de facto industry standards for safe and responsible practices in clinical and research environments. Because people can say all the time, all they want to, that these are recommendations.
Right.
Okay, but the fact of the matter is, and I can tell you experience having served as expert witness in some legal cases. Okay, I didn't do a lot, but it's interesting as all get out. But the first thing plaintiffs, if it's an injury, like say due to a burn or something like that, the first thing the plaintiff's is going to have, the plaintiff's attorney is going to have, is the MR Safe Practice Guidelines. Now here it goes, but see, think about this for a second. Is your facility ACR accredited?
Yep.
Sure it is.
Every time, right?
Okay. It has to be, for insurance purposes,
Reimbursement.
right? Reimbursement, absolutely. So if you look at the ACR accrediting process, they also, part of that, and in fact, part of your annual physics inspection, the physicist comes in and he has to check off, do they have this, do they do this, do they do this, right? Do they do this, and so on, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And your radiologist signs it and attests that they, in fact, followed this.
I've done this
correct?
stuff, right? Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, go ahead and say it's a
recommendation.
Say it's a recommendation if you want to.
Right.
It's a recommendation if you don't want to have a whole lot of trouble. Right.
Exactly.
But no, it's not mandated, and that's a problem. I mean, I really think that's a problem. We don't do a good job of self-regulation. Okay. Medical errors. This was something that came out in the talk we were doing, or I forget what it was we were working on. But anyway, how many people?
The airplane?
Well, no, just the medical errors, medical errors in general. How many medical errors annually how many people die
in
the
it's the
U.S.?
second leading cause, right? I've heard it's the second leading cause
of death, probably so. How many? But it depends on what statistics you get. I mean, they range. It depends on who you listen to, right? So we're talking about patients dying from medical errors.
Can I tell them what the equivalent is?
I mean, it's. But what would you think? Now, see, this is not going in having an appendectomy and you flip a clot and like a complication or an error.
This is malpractice.
It's an error.
An error.
It's an error, medication error.
So how
Are you
many?
asking how many, like, what's the numbers per year?
Yeah, per year in the U.S.
Come on, throw it out there.
This is fun for me. I'm really good at guessing how many jelly beans are in the jar, by the way. I'm going to say, I know I'm going to be way off. It's always way, and that's the trick. It's always way more than you think. I'm going to say $250,000.
Okay.
Ooh, I was going to go that high. I was going to say more like 100,000.
Okay, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of a 737 aircraft going down every single day.
What?
And it is actually,
Wow.
Isn't that?
That's crazy.
actually, I want you around with the jelly bean jar because if you go by Medicare estimates, it's about $250,000.
Wow. Dang, he's never wrong.
Did I just win a free dinner?
I mean, but there's some that are higher and some that are lower.
Right.
And I saw an article where some guy that's the head of some hospital association says, no, we think it's more, we're more comfortable with somebody else's numbers, which was still like 100-something thousand. It's like, we're more comfortable with that. We're comfortable with that? Okay, because, again, it's just kind of an expected thing. And so I heard a radiologist one time, or I heard a story of Manny Canal told me one time, and it's some legal case he was involved with, that a radiologist on the stand, well, people just get burned in MRI. It's a risk of MRI. No, it's not. No,
It
you know,
can be
it is
completely
not.
mitigated.
Right.
It truly,
If
if
done
you do
correctly,
things
right?
correctly.
right.
Yeah.
It's not a risk. So anyway, to your point, so first off, I think they established that this is de facto industry standards. And quite honestly, if your site is ACR accredited, and if you have a problem, you know, you don't have to follow this. You're just going to have to justify why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly.